Welcome to the Period Story Podcast, the podcast where we get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods. We chat with women about their period story, their first period, their journey ever since, and we open up a conversation to help break taboos and stigmas around menstruation. I'm your host, Denise Brothers. I'm a yoga teacher and registered nutritionist specializing in women's health, hormones, and the menstrual cycle. I'm also the author of You Can Have a Better Period, the book Publishers Weekly calls an empowering debut, an informative, refreshing take on women's health. It's available from Amazon, Bookshop, and anywhere else you purchase books. Today's episode of Period Story is such a good one. I have a fantastic conversation with Dr Golnoush Golshirazi, who is a scientist, entrepreneur, and one of the co-founders of ScreenMe, which is a patient-centric at-home testing company. Golnoush shares a really powerful story of how she was diagnosed with endometriosis, how it took her nearly 6,000 pounds to find out that she had endometriosis, and the fluke that led to her finally going down the right diagnosis pathway. Hi, Golnoush. Thank you so much for coming onto the show today. I'm really excited to chat to you. We have a lot of the same common interests, so really excited to chat. But first, tell me the story of your very first period.
Thank you for having me. It's a story that I don't think I'll ever forget. Probably one of the most dramatic moments of my life. I know I was 12. I was 12 and I was on holiday with my family, and my extended family, my aunts and my uncles, and we were all staying at a big house. And I was a child. I feel like 12-year-olds these days are a bit more mature than 12-year-olds my day for some reason. I feel like at 12, I was just a child. I was playing. It was all a lot more innocent. And I remember it very vividly, the sudden pain. It was like someone stabbed me in my right side. And it very, very, just took the air out of me. And I was doubled over. It wasn't anything subtle. It wasn't any kind of cramping. It was extreme pain, agonizing pain. And I was doubling over. I was telling my mom, everyone knew I'm not well. They thought it's my appendix. They thought something's going wrong. There was talk of, should we go to the hospital? Should we not go to the hospital? No one thought she started her period. It wasn't something that anyone, came to even my mom, no one just thought maybe she started her period. It was only after quite a few minutes or so, I needed to go to the bathroom, and I went to the toilet, pulled down my pants, and I screamed because there's blood, and when you've been in that much pain and there's so much drama happening and everyone thinks I have to go to the hospital and I don't know what's wrong, and suddenly there's blood, you think you're dying. I was like, I must be dying. This is it. And I screamed, and my mum came running in, and I said, there's blood. I'm going to die. And she said, no, you're not dying. You've started your period. And that was how it started. That was how it started, Denise.
And did you know what a period was? So when you said, when you told your mom that you thought you were dying,
yeah.
And then she said, oh, that's actually your period. Had you been taught a bit about periods at that point?
Yeah, I did know about periods. I think unlike a lot of kids, actually, I asked my mom how babies are made at the age of, I think, 6. I think I was 6. I asked my mom how our baby's made, and my mom sat me down with a book on female anatomy, and she actually told me all about periods. She didn't tell me about how the sperm meets the egg, and the baby, but she told me all about all the steps in between. So she told me a lot about periods. She told me how periods, what happens, you bleed. So at the age of 6, 7, I was told, in scientific detail, what periods are and how they happen. And then, some of my friends started their periods a bit earlier at the age of like 9, 10. So I knew I knew that happens, but it's not something that I think at that age, until you start yours, it's not something you spend much time thinking about, or just acknowledging either, other than the fact that one day I'm going to start my periods, and that's going to involve bleeding. You don't really think about it at all. And you don't know, I didn't pay attention to more than that, other than the fact that I'll bleed one day. That was all that was in my head. But at that point, that left my head. I didn't think that that was going to happen now and this is it.
Wow. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because kids, they ask questions. They're really forthright, and they're really kind of, they get straight to the point. But then you can just tell, like, once they've got to taken in the information that they want to know, they just lose interest.
It just goes
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you had this experience where your first period was incredibly painful. And then how did it go from there?
It was really difficult. I think that, that day was very difficult. It was the matter of, the pain, all the pain, and then being told I've started my period. When my mom told me it's my period, I started crying. Because I think I was overwhelmed by, it's a massive change in your life as a woman. And I started crying. And I think it was because, first of all, I had to acknowledge that my life has changed now. And I've never been a big fan of change. So that was the first sign. And then there was the overwhelming feeling of shame that everyone in that house now knew that I'd started my period, because it started so dramatically, that everyone would be asking and knowing. So there was also the fact that now everyone knows that I've started my period. And although my family have never been a type that would shame periods or women, and it quite empowered line of women in my family, but I still felt that shame of people knowing that I've started my period and I'm bleeding. And then there was the matter of, is it going to be like this for the rest of my life? That daunted, kind of just as a child, you kind of think, am I going to be in pain? And so it took me a moment to come to terms with all of those complicated emotions. And going forward, I had quite regular periods. They would come regularly every month, and they would come painfully every month. My mother had painful periods. So did her mother. And so it wasn't something that was out of the norm. It was like, this is what periods are like for the women of our family. And so you kind of inherited that pain. And that's how it went. And of course, holidays ended and I had to go back to school. And that meant going to school as a woman, as a young woman who has periods, painful periods, who has to miss school every month or so because of her periods. So it was a start of a struggle of some sort in my life.
It's really interesting that you said that, other people in your family knowing that you had just started your period was a source of shame, and that you had made that link between people knowing about your period and shame so early on. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it happens so automatically and instinctively that you don't process, you don't think why you're feeling shame, you just do. And it's not like anyone had instilled that shame in me. No one had ever said, periods are bad, or periods are dirty, or periods are something we need to hide. No one had ever said that to me, but I still felt shame. And thinking about it now, it must, looking back, we don't talk about periods. No one says they're bad, and no one says they're dirty, and no one says they're a problem, but no one talks about them full stop. And I think when we don't talk about something, automatically it comes with a baggage of shame. And I think that was the case, is this secret that women carry with them that is never spoken about. And mine was very public in that moment. And I think that is what triggered that shame for me is, I've never heard anyone else advertise their period, or I've never seen anyone else make such a big deal out of their period. And now everyone knows about mine. And so that automatically made me quite embarrassed. And then I think it goes on, you then learn about your period, you knew, but you kind of learn about your specific period and you go on in life, and every month it comes, but you don't tell anyone that it's come. You just get on with it. And mine was painful. I would be embarrassed to tell anyone because it just feels like you're making a scene, everyone else has periods and they're not talking about them. So I felt a little more even because mine was painful. And I would think, would people think I'm being a drama queen? Would people think I'm lying? Because not everyone seems to be feeling what I'm feeling. And not everyone seems to need to take a day out of school because they have their period. So it was a lot of the inherent shame of having a period, then the added shame of I'm someone who can't deal with her period pains as well as others. Complicated time. And then you eventually learn that, it's not just women. Men is even worse. You don't want your male teachers to know you've started your period. That was even more embarrassing. And again, it's because no one speaks about it. It's a topic that it's just the elephant in the room. It exists, but everyone ignores it. So if you stop ignoring it, you automatically feel shame.
And having a period that was so painful that you would miss school every month, how did you cope with that? Was because you would have had to have that conversation with one of your parents to say, I'm in so much pain, I can't go to school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mother was always on the in. It was, they knew. The first day of my period would be a day that I can't even walk, let alone go. I wouldn't be able to walk for a good couple of hours. It's a time where I can't walk. I would sometimes, not often, but sometimes I would even vomit because it'd just be so painful. And so my mom, my sister, my immediate family would always know. Interestingly, I would never talk to my father about it. Again, I think it just comes from that kind of thing that was installed in me of we just don't talk, it's just embarrassing. I knew my mom would tell him. I wouldn't tell him directly, right? It's just something I wouldn't do. And so it was, my family knew. So, my mom knew. I would always get very upset also because I had to miss school and I didn't know what kind of implications that would have. And I didn't find school to be very understanding either. It wasn't, I don't think schools are educated enough on the matters of female health, even though I went to an all-girls school, and it kind of makes you think, these are young women going through the system. And this is where they spend more time than they do at home. How is it that there's so little information on the basic anatomy and physiology of women at school? There just wasn't. And no one ever spoke to me about my periods at school. No one ever spoke to me about my health at school. And when I left my school at year 11, I have a yearbook, and my form teacher has written a little note in that yearbook. And she says, never had a student who's missed so many days of school for health. And, this is kind of like a reminder for me of how uneducated our educational system is when it comes to women's health. How even women at these institutions still are lacking information on how to educate younger girls about their health and how to care for them when it comes to their health.
That's really shocking that a teacher would not only say that, but write it in your yearbook as a permanent reminder of how she viewed you. And it was through this prism of your poor health.
Yeah.
Very, very surprising, and just underlines your point that teachers need better education on this topic.
Definitely.
And then I read online that you said that you had to spend around £6,000 of your savings, ordering private tests to help you get an eventual diagnosis of endometriosis at age 27.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that journey? Because, you started with very painful periods. You missed a lot of school when you were in secondary, and then 27. So you had finished your university. I'm guessing you had finished, or you were doing your PhD. That's a long time to be battling with a monthly kind of issue, that condition that, would be so debilitating.
It is a long time, and it's exhausting, Glenise. It takes a toll. People don't notice it. You think disabilities are visible and you think you would be able to see them. They're not. And I think having chronic pain, regular chronic pain, or regular pain is a disability. It interferes with your life in every stage. So it started, like you said, at secondary school, it had already started doing that. It was interfering in my life. It affected my friendships. It affected my relationship with my teachers. It affected my confidence, lack of control. Because even though they're regular and they're coming, you never know exactly when it's going to hit and how bad it's going to hit. And so planning is hard, knowing play dates, birthdays at that age. And my period would come and I can't go. I can't go. And then university, you get better at dealing with it. You get better at hiding that one day. But then there are times when I was at Cambridge doing my undergrad, let's go back to A-levels. I was doing my A-levels. And that's the first time I went to the doctors. And I said, I've got very painful periods. And I think they might come when I have exams, my A-level exams. And I'm terrified because I won't be able to sit my exam if I'm on my period. And my GP told me to take paracetamol. And that, you'd think if paracetamol was going to solve my problem, I wouldn't be here. And that was my first encounter with the medical system around period pains. I was lucky my period didn't come on my A-level exams. And then I went to university. And I was at Cambridge. Cambridge is an intense environment. And you sit exams at the end of the year, which dictate your entire year. And that, the anxiety, that was my nightmare, is my period coming then. And it did. One day it did. And I had an exam. I had my evolution and behavior exam. And I remember it waking up in the morning and I couldn't breathe. And I had an exam. I called the porters at the college and I said, I've started my period and I can't move. And I thought to myself, he must be thinking, this whole college is girls. Everyone living in this building is girls. Why is this woman calling me about her period pains? He was very good. He was an elderly gentleman who was very, very gentle and sweet. And he said, stay put. I'm going to make some calls. And they made some calls and they got back to me and said, do not fret. We are coming with the exam paper. And so they brought the exam paper to my bedroom. And they said, you can sit it here. At the time I was grateful. I could not be more grateful. I said, oh my goodness, look at these people. They're going out of their way. They're bringing my exam paper. It was only after the exam, they took the paper away and I sat there and I cried. Because it kind of came to me that I sat that paper in terrible pain, let alone the hormones, but terrible pain. I was doubling over while writing. And that's not okay. It wasn't, that's not something to be grateful for. And I guess it was a wake up call for me then that there's, something is wrong with me, but I can't be the only person. And surely this system needs to wake up. People need to know that this happens and it's not okay. I cannot be measured to people who don't have as much pain at the same time, let alone men who never have periods. How are we putting everyone on the same scale? I understand the whole, equality. I want to be equal. I want to have the same rights, but we have to look at the ground we're standing on and make sure we balance that before we start measuring people and equality. We can't expect a fish to climb a tree, right? You have to give them first the apparatus to breathe outside water before you expect them to climb. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was being asked to compete with people who just, it wasn't fair. I didn't, it wasn't fair. That's when I started being interested in the system, the healthcare, and I started pushing the GP. I started asking for help. I was told I have anxiety. I was given anxiety medication. I was given depression medication. I was told I have IBS. I was told I have PCOS, all of that, and nothing helped. Everyone was throwing these terms at me without giving me any explanation. My symptoms got worse, not my period symptoms, but my other symptoms. I would go to hospital outside of my period every month or so, at least 3-4 times a year, from abdominal pain, just severe abdominal pain. And they would be scanning me. They wanted to get my appendix out. They thought maybe it's the appendix, maybe it's that. None of it. And I didn't let them because there was no sign that there is an appendix issue. And then I decided to go private. And I spent a lot of money on private scanning. Nothing was found. Doctors still didn't find anything. And then accidentally, at one of my scans where we had, it was a gastro specialist. I kind of insisted to him, and he was a guy, and he's one of my better doctors. And I insisted to him that I can feel something very low down. I said, if I wasn't sure that I'm not pregnant, I would think I'm pregnant. There's something I can feel. And he said, let's have an ultrasound of your abdomen. And they did an ultrasound. And again, I was very lucky. It's all a matter of luck, really. I was very lucky that the person who was doing the ultrasound that day said to me, listen, I don't think there's anything with your gut, but I let me get my colleague who does ultrasounds on women. And she specialized. I want her to have a look. So someone else came in. She had a look and she said to me, I think you need to see a gynecologist, and asked them to investigate endometriosis. And I asked her, how come you're saying this? I know that you can't see endometriosis on an external scan. And she said, no, you can't. And I can't be 100% sure, but I've done a lot of scans and I know a lot of women. And what I'm seeing, to me, doesn't look like the average polycystic ovarian cysts. To me, they look like they might be different type of cysts. And so they might actually be endometriosis rather than polycystic. And she was my miracle angel in that moment. It was just by chance that she was there, and this guy who was doing my scan decided to get her opinion. And so then I paid more to go see another gynecologist with those results, and they did an MRI and more scans, and they confirmed an endometriosis diagnosis. Now, I didn't stop there. I mean, I was overwhelmed because I was like, finally, I know what's going on. But the first thing that gynecologist told me was, okay, well, what we can do is we can do, my colon was stuck to my cervix. And she said, we can go in and do some surgery, but then you'll have a year to get pregnant. At this point, she hadn't asked me if I'm trying to get pregnant, if I'm even in a position to try out. I wasn't in a position to try. That was the last thing on my mind at that point. And that was it. That was all I was provided. So I just thanked her and I left, and I called another gynecologist, and I went and saw another gynecologist. And he said, he explained to me more. He explained that he thinks that we shouldn't be hasty in making decisions. He offered me hormonal contraception, but it wasn't right for me. I have a family history of embolisms or blood clots. And so I didn't want to have any hormonal interventions. And so he said to me, okay, well, now we have to say, what do you want? You're not trying to have a baby. So what do you want? And I said, I want to live a better life. I want to be more in charge of my body, and I want to control my symptoms. And obviously I'm concerned about my future fertility. So those are the aspects that I want to focus on. And he said to me, from my part, I can only do some private testing for your fertility and get your egg reserves and go down that route. From a symptom control and living a better life, this is going to be up to you. You're going to have to do your own research and on your work and figure out what works for you, what doesn't, try supplements. And that's where it all started. So at that point, I'd spent quite a lot of money on diagnosis and consultations alone. And then it was a matter of, okay, well, then I did my fertility testing and spent over £600 on that, which was crazy. And then it was a matter of, all right, well, how do I do this now? How do I take care of my body and my endometriosis? What do I do? And I was a scientist, at this point I was finishing my PhD, like you rightly said. And that was difficult, by the way, getting through a PhD. Twice I wanted to quit. And my co-founder, Dr. Golnoush Golshirazi, he was there and he helped me through all of that. But that was when I thought, okay, as a scientist who knows a lot about the human body, who's a molecular biologist, I still didn't know what to do with myself. And so then I had to plan my way through a lot of research, contacting a lot of health coaches and nutritionists and practitioners, women's health practitioners, as well as doctors who were open-minded to helping me in alternative ways rather than just medication. And that's brought me to a stage where I could be a lot more confident. I took charge of my health a lot more. My period pains were a lot more manageable. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes they come strong. So it's not, I have flare-ups, but just less often as I used to. Anxiety is much less than it was previously. And so the quality of my life changed drastically. And I haven't been to the hospital for pains like that in the past 3 years. And so that for me is a huge, and that was the trigger. It was the trigger of, I want to do something about this and I want to do it now. And that means education of women about their health, their anatomy, their body, and how to take control of it. Providing access to cheaper alternatives in getting insights about your body, your fertility, your hormones, your vagina. I was having recurring infections, even though I wasn't sexually active. I was having these infections. And I later found out that it was because my vaginal microbiome was an absolute mess because of my hormonal balance issues. So getting that kind of insight gave me the power to do something about it. And I wanted to make that available for women. So that they can take charge of that. And so hopefully they can teach their daughters. And so hopefully we can have a whole societal change in the way we view women, how we help women, and the way we conduct research and even develop medication for women.
What really gets me about your story is, well, a couple of things. It's a story I've heard so many times before, but also, the fact that you getting this on this road to a diagnosis was a fluke.
Yeah, it was.
if that ultrasound technician who specialized in women's health hadn't been in that day, you would have had to have gone back on that kind of conveyor belt of scans and to seeing more doctors. So that really gets to me that, that we still don't have the training in all aspects of, medicine to really identify women's health conditions, like the fact that, they thought it was a digestive issue. They thought you had the IBS. We know that, that's one of the most common misdiagnoses of endometriosis. But also going back to what you said about you sitting that exam paper at Cambridge and how, I'm sure that they thought that they were doing you a massive favor.
Oh, yeah. They were doing what they could, right?
Yeah.
Walk into that bedroom.
Yeah.
Paper and an invigilator just for her.
And the fact that they weren't able to say, well, actually, you can just do it tomorrow. We can make a setup for you. Because if they were able to send an invigilator to your room, then they could have just done the same sort of thing the next day. But the kind of lack of understanding of the level of pain that you were experiencing. But kudos to you for being able to write that paper while you were, doubled up in pain. And I'm sure you did very well.
I could have done better, right? No, I don't think I at the point, my friends were like, well, my mom was like, well done, you did this. And I look back and I think, I don't, yes, well done for sitting that paper in pain. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have refused to sit that paper. And maybe that would have forced the system to then accommodate for my pain. I think this is the mistake that a lot of women make is we are massive at accommodating, accommodating, right? We hate confrontation, or we hate being a burden. And I certainly hate being I'm really, really bad at feeling like I'm inconveniencing other people. But for the sake, I think at this point is, I think for the sake of, if I ever have daughters, I don't want them to go through this. And for that sake, I think we have to be like, actually, no, there is nothing heroic in walking all over yourself. That is not heroic. You're setting the path for just being ignored, mistreated, just not being taken seriously. And definitely you're setting the path for the healthcare system to not differentiate between women's health and generic health or men's health. And that's where the issue is. I had a lot of high-tech tests done on me. I was having my arterial blood being examined because they thought something's wrong with my heart. My resting heart rate was way above what it should be. And so I was having all sorts of things, like really high-end tests being done. The only reason being, no one stopped to think, when looking at this individual with these symptoms, let's also think about the fact that she has a vagina, a uterus, and ovaries. Let's think about that also, because if someone had done that, surely, earlier than that, someone would say, maybe let's think that this might be a hormonal situation. Maybe let's think that this is to do with her reproductive system, because she has one. We can't diagnose or treat women by completely ignoring the fact that they have a whole reproductive system and a hormonal system that rules everything.
And you talked also about how you had seen that doctor who basically said, you're gonna have to do your own research. Basically saying, okay, I've offered you the pill, you don't want to take it, you have family history, so go off and do your own research. And now you're a scientist, so you are comfortable with diving into the research, going onto PubMed, doing a search, knowing how to even use PubMed, knowing how to dissect a paper and the different types of papers. And I find that the fact that, you still struggled to find answers, even given your background. And I just think about women that I speak to who are just they just feel completely unmoved by this. They can't find answers. They're Googling, they're following just random advice from health, just fitness influencers and just anything, because they're just so desperate for answers. And now this led to you starting your own femtech business. With that word femtech, is that, I kind of, it feels like to me in the same category as mom blogger. It's, you're a blogger and you're a mom. You are a tech entrepreneur and you're a woman, Yeah,
I feel like femtech has now become the generic term for women's health. Women's health, anything entrepreneurship or solutions, it's all kind of now coming and fitting into femtech. It did lead to that, struggling as a scientist to even find out what I need, and realizing that how many different pieces I needed in order to really get the help I want, the quality of help. And then, of course, realizing the majority of the women out there won't even be able to do what I did. I was privileged enough to have that saving to be able to spend it. I was privileged enough to have had the education and the time to be able to spend finding what I needed. And so it shouldn't be it was hard as a woman who was privileged, let alone if you're not. If you are a mother who doesn't have time to even scratch her head, let alone spend time on yourself. If you haven't had education in the sciences, if you don't have the money to spend, you shouldn't have to live in pain or live with a lack of help and support. And so the initial idea was, why can't we have, doctors, health coach and practitioners, nutritionists, women's health coaches, as well as scientists come together in order to form a platform, an environment where women can go and they can get the help they need from the medicals, from a medical side, from a holistic side, and from a scientific side. Why is that not available, and why is that not there? And that's what started my journey with ScreenMe, is bringing together medical, scientific, and holistic practitioners in order to provide women with a safe space where they can be heard or listened to. Because I know that for 20, whatever, 9, 8, 17 years, no one actually took me. So, no one listened to what I'm saying, which is, hello, I'm in pain. Something is wrong. You're anxious, you're depressed, you have exams. That's you not listening to me. So a space for women to be heard and then to be advised in a scientifically accurate and professional but open-minded way, and provided affordable testing in order to get the insight, and then put in touch. That's what we do in ScreenMe, is we get women who come to us for advice, they do their testing, and then we connect them with the right individuals who can help them. I didn't know where to look to find those health coaches that could help me. It was, Google is a big place, and who knows what to, I can confidently say 80% of the information I read was not true. A safe space to be heard, to be provided with insight, and to be then referred to the right sources in order to receive the personal help that you need.
So you and your co-founder founded your company, ScreenMe, and there's a focus on testing gut and vaginal, along with other types of blood testing. I'm really interested in what you said about the vaginal microbiome and how certain conditions where there's a hormonal aspect affect the vaginal microbiome. And what's really interesting is that I don't think that, as you said, you were having lots of infections, and then you finally made the link between your changing hormones and the issues with your vaginal microbiome. And I was just reading something yesterday about this woman. She was constantly getting UTIs and how she had constantly being put on antibiotics to try to clear the UTIs. And then reading the comments, so many other women talking about the exact same issue, and then starting to talk about other issues with their health. And it just made me think how, we're starting to know more about the gut.
Yeah.
And it's a really fascinating space, but there's still so much research that needs to be done around the vaginal microbiome. So can you just talk a little bit for someone listening who doesn't even know, oh my gosh, my vagina has a microbiome. What does that mean? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the fact that we know so much, everyone knows gut health and gut microbiome, and we don't. The vagina itself is representative of the way our society works. The reason we all know about the gut microbiome is because men also have guts, and so it's a bigger market, and so there's more money being pumped into that market. So everyone talks about it, but the vaginal microbiome is a lot more understood than the gut is, because it's a lot more simple. So yes, the vagina has a microbiome. The vagina is an opening into our body. And so what people don't realize is that because it's an opening into our reproductive system, it's actually a very sensitive area. It means things can go into our body, unwanted things, disease-causing agents. And so the vagina is like the immune system of that reproductive system. It's there to stop you getting unwanted disease-causing bacteria, yeast, other, viruses. It's there to stop it. And it does that through the microbiome. So it has an ecosystem of bacteria that are there to help keep the reproductive system safe and the vagina clean. So the vagina is self-cleaning when it's healthy. So this environment is not unlike the gut. It's meant to be not diverse. The gut, we want it to be diverse, to be healthy. The vagina should not be diverse. We want the vagina to be dominated by protective bacteria that make it acidic. And when we have, health issues, so the vagina, this ecosystem is maintained through this very fine balance of hormones that we have. And when we have any kind of issues with our hormonal system, with our immune system, the vagina reacts to that. The ecosystem reacts to that. So, finding that out while I was doing my PhD and having my own issues, it was mind blowing. I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much we can understand by looking at the vaginal ecosystem. I could tell if a woman was having, estrogen issues just by looking at the vaginal ecosystem when the bloods would not show anything. So the vagina is a very, very good way of looking at women's hormonal and immune health. It's a very representative ecosystem to be looking at. It's a powerful tool when it comes to insight, diagnosis, and treatment. So your vagina is there. The microbiome is there. It's really important. It plays a really important role in preventing infections, in lowering your risk of STDs as well. So we know women who don't get STDs sometimes, even when they're not that careful, and women who get them all the time. And the difference is their vaginal microbiomes and how protective it is, which is very interesting. So your protection against infections and STDs, protection against HPV. So, what makes a woman get rid of an HPV infection? The clearance rate is higher, and woman who doesn't is their vaginal microbiome, and how protective that is. So we know that women who have imbalanced vaginal microbiome, dysbiosis, they have very slow clearance of HPV. And so that can then go on to cancer and other complications and pelvic inflammatory disease and all of that. So the vaginal microbiome is really important for infection, STD, HPV, and fertility complications. So we know that women who don't have enough lactobacillus or protective bacteria in their vagina are at higher risk of miscarriage, infertility, and also IVF implantation failure. So really, the vagina is the key, really at the core of a woman's reproductive system and her immune system. And I think all women should really understand their vagina and give it, the attention it needs in order to protect themselves from disease down the line.
What are a few simple things that a woman can do to improve her vaginal microbiome?
Yeah, good question. So first of all would be hormonal health. Think hormonal health. So balancing your hormones is really, really important in order to take care of your vaginal microbiome. No matter what you do, if your hormones are not doing well, you can't fix the microbiome. So think hormonally friendly lifestyle. Think hormonally friendly nutrition. Understand your periods. Talk to someone who understands periods, and eat for your hormones. I think that's really, really important way to start that. The next would be hygiene. A lot of people think the vagina needs to be cleaned, and there's a lot of products out there that pushes us to clean the vagina. The vagina is self-cleaning if it's healthy. So actually using products to clean the vagina is going to cause problems. It's going to change the pH of the vagina, and it can also cause dysbiosis or an imbalance of that bacterial environment. So we shouldn't really be washing the vagina with any cleaning products. Water alone should be enough. If the vagina is smelling abnormal, or it's offending you, or you're uncomfortable, that is a big sign. That's your body telling you something is wrong. Your line of protection down there is down. And so get help. Find out why that's happening. Get yourself screened. Find out what is going on, why there's a dysbiosis. And then there's ways of then fixing that. Working with a coach, with an intimate health coach, you can actually take control and regain that balance. So that's really, really important with the hygiene part of things as well. And this other is your sex life. It's really important to be aware of, obviously, safe sex, as everyone knows, is really important. But then even if you are with one partner, I often find a woman becoming, I'm always just with my partner, so I don't need to be careful. You need to be careful. So the products you use in your sex life are really important. So lube, for example, is one that can be very problematic in the vaginal microbiome. Just over-the-counter lube, stuff that we buy has stuff in it that can cause dysbiosis in the vagina. So be careful of the products that you use in your intimate life in general. Make sure that they're vaginally friendly. Unfortunately, products are made for purposes like making sex easy, but they're not made with the thought of what will this do to the vagina? How will this affect the vagina? That's not taken into account when products are created. So do some research. We've got a lot of blogs on our website about these topics, educational blogs on, how to choose lube, how to take care of the vagina. That can be very helpful. I think being aware of these things will automatically change the way you start choosing and using products. Underwear, choose cotton. Be careful of others. It increases your use. The last tip I'm going to say, because it's so often, is we love living in leggings. Everyone's wearing leggings all the time. Leggings are sometimes the number one culprit of vaginal dysbiosis. It's not breathable. It's not as breathable. It creates quite a dark, moist environment. And that can encourage the growth of some of the bad bacteria. So be wary of the stuff that you wear around your groin area for long periods of time. Make sure that you are allowing your groin area to breathe, and take care of it. Be aware. I would say an annual vaginal microbiome test for every woman is the way to make sure that you're protected, that you're lowering your risk of infections. And as you go through life, you're one step ahead of the game, and even your hormones.
Fantastic. I know that will help so many. Like I learned something there as well. And I'll definitely be linking to the blog post that you mentioned. Choosing the right lube, super important.
Yeah.
So look out for those in the show notes. Just to kind of close off our conversation, you are really passionate about educating women and making sure that they feel the empowerment that maybe you didn't feel when you were going through your diagnosis journey. What do you think that women need to do to take charge of their health?
That's a good question. I think it starts with learning about the body. That's the first step, is acknowledge that you have a vagina, a uterus, and ovaries, irrespective of fertility and having a baby. It doesn't matter whether having a child is on your timeline or not. Your body is more than that. And so learn of the importance of your reproductive system in your health. Keep track of your periods. Understand how your body ticks. When do this is how I feel at this point in my cycle. That's how I feel at the other point in my cycle. I get pain at this point. Understand how your body ticks. Make friends with it. That's the first step. I think I didn't understand my body. And it took me a while to actually be, okay, my body is unique and this is how it is. And then the next step would be get insight into the different aspects of your body. Whether it be, I'm going to actually do I'm going to just do a normal nutrition test, like just, my bloods, and look at my vitamin levels and see where I stand. That can be quite empowering, just knowing what your body needs. Get insight, understand your unique needs, and then it doesn't mean you have to make huge changes in your life to take control. You don't. Really small changes go a long, long way. They did for me, and they do for a lot of women that we've seen, that we've tested, that we've referred on. Little small changes make a huge life-changing difference. The first step being, I feel like someone's heard me. I feel like I understand my body better, and I now know what to do next. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be time. But it's just about taking that first step.
Fantastic. Where can people find you?
Oh, everywhere. So you can definitely find us on screenme.co.uk. There's a small chat box on the website. That's me, usually 99% of the time. You can find us on Instagram at ScreenMeWoman. Feel free to message us there as well, or just email us at support@screenme.co.uk. We're very open in supporting women and directing them in the direction that they need to go. Sometimes we can't help, but we will then direct women in where they need to go, or just provide information where they need it. So don't be shy in asking questions, or just saying, I need help in this thing. We are more than happy to just help.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been so informative speaking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me, Lenise.
For more inspiring conversations, head over to periodstorypod.com, where we have so many more for you to peruse. If you want help with your menstrual or hormone health, email me on hello@eatlovemove.com to set up a free 30-minute hormone health review. If you like today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Tag us, come say hi, and send in your requests for who you'd like to see on the show on Instagram and Twitter on @periodstorypod, or email us at hello@periodstorypod.com. I'm Lenise Brothers, and you've been listening to Period Story. Thank you so much for listening.